Hi, my name's Graham, and I've been making and designing my own crankbaits for about 15 years now. The last 7 or 8 of these years I've been using actually Alumilite products to cast my lures, and here's an example of one that I've created. This is one of the lures in a series of 3 that I'd like to enter into the contest. I have a series of 3 bass lures, a shallow diving, a medium diving, and a deep diving lure. This series of lures is unique in that, one, they're adjustable. You can adjust the swimming action on these crankbaits to match the conditions that you're fishing, as well as kind of what the fish preference is for that day. The other thing that these lures do is they have a very small presence as they travel through the water. And what I mean by presence is that as a crankbait travels through the water, it displaces some of the water that it travels through. If it displaces a lot of that water, it creates a lot of drag on the lure, and kind of creates a very large sonic presence. And predator fish, honestly, they don't eat things that have a large sonic presence. If you think about a bait fish traveling through the water, it's going to slice right through the water effortlessly. So what I've done here is I've created lures that travel through the water without displacing very much of it. So they kind of slice right through the water effortlessly, more closely imitating a bait fish and therefore getting more strikes. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how the crankbaits that I design are adjustable. And so I've kind of got 2 sliders here. The first one is the way that the crankbait swims. Either we can have a top to bottom roll and a crankbait that's swimming with a lot of top to bottom roll. The swim action is going to be a lot of top to bottom. I'm exaggerating that quite a bit, but a lot of top to bottom. And so anywhere on that sliding scale, we can bring it all the way down to a side to side swim, where the swimming action on the crankbait now is going side to side. And so all the way down at the bottom, it's got a complete side to side swim. All the way up at the top, it's got much more of a rolling swim. And then anywhere on that sliding scale, you can adjust between the 2. So I've set it up here to have 4 different adjustments. Somewhere in between is going to have an action that's got a little bit top to bottom and a little bit side to side. And so you can adjust anywhere in that scale. The other adjustment that can happen with the crankbaits here is the wiggle that occurs. So we can go anywhere from a tight wiggle, and a crankbait with a tight wiggle has got a real tight vibration. So it's going really fast, it's got a really tight vibration. You could bring that down all the way on the other end of the scale, which is a wide wobble, and a crankbait with a wide wobble then doesn't have that tight wiggle, it's got much more of a wider, slower wobble. Now when you combine these 2 together, we got 4 choices here with the top to bottom, side to side swim. We got 4 choices here with the tight wiggle and the wide wobble. Well, that is 4 choose 4, or 16 different swimming actions that you can get on this crankbait. So what I started here with is I got my little sliders here. I got one pointed to the top to bottom roll. So I've got the bait set up for more top to bottom roll, but I've got also a wide wobble on that. And the reason that I started here is because that's how I started fishing this spring. When I first started fishing bass this spring, the water temperature was 47 degrees. And 47 degrees, it's a little difficult to get fish usually to hit a crankbait, but I was able to adjust these baits in to what they wanted at that particular time. And so what they wanted then in a real cold water is they wanted that top to bottom roll, but I didn't want to have a tight fast wiggle. What I wanted to do was really slow the retrieve down of that bait. So I went with a top to bottom roll, but I also gave it a real wide wobble. So when my bait was swimming, it was doing a lot of this slow motion like that. And so I was getting pretty good action at a really slow retrieve. And so that was what the fish particularly wanted on that day. When it was 47 degrees, I ended up catching a bunch of fish. So now I've readjusted the sliders to describe a fishing trip that I had again earlier in the spring. It was, I was fishing a river, and the river actually had been raining for a couple days before, and so the river was really high and muddy. And so I was out fishing smallmouth in the river, and what I figured out on this day is I went out there and I started adjusting the baits and trying to figure out exactly what they wanted, and what I ended up with was a really big side to side swim and a wide wobble. And so what I did with my bait in this particular case was I took the medium diving crankbait. The medium diving crankbait would dive deeper than the depth of the river. And so what I had was I had this really big side to side swim because I had the wide wobble on there as well. And what I ended up doing was kind of drifting that crankbait down the river, similar to the way you would maybe drift some live bait. And so what I did is I kind of drifted the crankbait down the river with this big side to side swim and this big wide wobble, and what would happen is it would dive down and bump the bottom. and every time it would bump the bottom, that big wide wobble would make it jump off the bottom. So basically what I had my crankbait doing was swimming down the river, bouncing off the bottom, making these big wobbles and jumping up like this, and that little bounce, bounce, bounce got the fish's attention in that dirty water, and I ended up catching a bunch of smallmouth. The next fishing situation that I want to describe is now into the summer. And so I'm bass fishing in the summers, both the rivers and the lakes now, because the rivers have cleaned up now in the summer. And so what the bass want is they want a bait that's moving pretty quickly. And so I've adjusted this wiggle up here way up tight. And when I adjust that wiggle tight, the bait travels through the water much quicker. I can pull the bait much quicker through the water while keeping that presence down. And so since we're still fishing for bass now, bass prefer more of a side-to-side swim usually, especially once the water warms up. So now that the water's warmed up and I'm fishing in the summer, we'll start with fishing a tight wiggle and maybe a little bit more side-to-side swim than top to bottom. And this allows me to pull the bait quickly through the water, and also if I need to, swim it as a jerk bait. So I can pull the bait through the water and stop it for a little bit. But basically get that bait moving really quickly through the water once it starts to warm up. So the last thing I'd like to show you is one of the lures in action. I've actually taken out the shallower diver of these 3 baits, and I got some video footage of it swimming in the water. And as I was getting video footage of this thing swimming in the water, I actually end up catching a fish. And I think as you'll watch me, adjust the lure and catch this fish, I really think it brings home the point that adjusting the swimming action is really important for catching fish. I found that it's more important than the actual color of the lure. If you can get that bait dialed in to the vibration that the fish want on that particular day, you really will catch a lot more fish. And I find that as I'm fishing, even from day to day, when I don't see, even when I can't understand or see any sort of visible or temperature changes or anything else like that, a lot of times I still have to adjust the bait to kind of get that vibration dialed into what the fish want on that particular day. And anyways, as I'm out here fishing, you'll see me casting, and I've been casting to this spot for maybe 15 minutes because I had to set the video equipment up and make sure the lighting was right and all that stuff. So I've been casting to this spot for like 15 minutes. And after I've been casting for 15 minutes, I quick make an adjustment and cast back out there and immediately catch one of the fish that obviously been hanging around that area, but whatever I was throwing before, he wasn't interested in that. But as soon as I make that adjustment, I flip it out there, bam, the bass actually ends up nailing the lure to kind of bring home the point that I'm trying to make here about the success that I've had with these adjustable crankbaits. So now I have the lure set up for the tiniest wobble, a lot of roll, and a tiny little wobble. What the hell's going on? Why would you be doing that to me right then? So I still have the bait now set up for rolling, but a wider wobble. Oh, apparently that was what the fish wanted in this particular time, because that bass there got pretty excited about that. Intent was not to catch a fish here, but I guess I did. So just case in point there, I had thrown this bait now before I started shooting video, testing the clarity in the water and all of that stuff, and I did not get a bite. And now I just adjusted the bait so it had a wider wobble, and it didn't take very long for that fish to think that was what I wanted. So let's see here if I get another shot with that. So now a wider wobble, still a roll. So now I still got the bait set up. Still got the bait set up so it's doing a lot of top to bottom as opposed to side to side, the way I have it adjusted right now. A lot of roll, not a lot of side to side. So now I have it adjusted for a lot more side to side. See, I'm getting a lot more action on this lure now. It's like I need to tune it just a little bit. So I'm getting a lot more back to front. You can see that back hook now is going back and forth a lot. The bait is not rolling as much. Okay, I've adjusted again now. Very little roll, a lot of back to front. You can see how much more flash we're getting there. A lot more back to front. You can also see that now when I do this, I can really get some action on a slow retrieve. Get a much slower retrieve and still get some action. So I can be reeling this bait very slow at this point. And you can see that even with a very slow retrieval, look at the wobble that I'm getting on that huge wide wobble. And so I would use this when I wanted a really, really slow retrieve. Maybe early spring fishing when the water's still cold and you want a really slow retrieve. Or maybe if we were fishing some stained or dirty water, you can really slow the retrieve down and still get a lot of action. Or quite frankly, if you're going after some really active fish, if you're going after some really aggressive fish, this would be fantastic. This bait right here is designed for, I designed this bait for bass, but with this action right there, you could catch steelhead or salmon on that bait as well, with that kind of wide wobble and action on there. So I hope this video has clarified some of the design ideas. One, that my crankbaits are adjustable and you can adjust the crankbait to match both the conditions and the mood of the fish for a particular time, and also that the presence of these crankbaits is very small so that it glides through the water pretty much effortlessly. I have intentionally left out the information about how exactly I'm adjusting these things or how my crankbaits are adjustable, and I've also left out why my crankbaits have a small presence. I am more than happy to share that with the committee. However, I think it would be unwise for me to post this on the internet in video format. These design ideas are very simple, and I think that if someone took a look at these, they could easily be reproduced. So if it comes down to the end there and the committee would like more information, I am more than willing to share all of the design ideas that go behind the adjustability and both the low presence. Thanks.